Welcome to the Lapin Law Office's virtual law office, being brought to you from Dallas, Texas. This video presentation will address the subject of the structure of Texas state courts. Before we look at the structure of the Texas courts, let's look at the structure of court systems across America in general. The lowest level is, of course, the trial court level. Often the trial court level will be broken into two sub-levels: courts of general jurisdiction and courts of limited jurisdiction. The courts of general jurisdiction will hear most civil cases. They'll hear serious criminal cases, such as felonies, and possibly hear appeals from the courts of limited jurisdiction. Courts of limited jurisdiction, in turn, will often hear minor civil cases, such as small claims cases, and minor criminal cases, usually misdemeanors and infractions. Appeals from the trial court level will be heard at the Intermediate Court of Appeals. The Intermediate Court of Appeals will hear appeals from final judgments of the trial courts, as well as what we call interlocutory appeals, appeals from cases that have not had final judgments entered but need a decision on a discrete matter so that the trial can continue. And then finally, we have appeals to the Supreme Court, usually the court of last resort in any jurisdiction. Appeals to a Supreme Court, unlike appeals to an intermediate level court, are not appeals of right. They're appeals that are discretionary. A Supreme Court gets to pick and choose which cases it will hear and which cases it will not hear. Turning to the structure of the federal court system, we see that the structure we've just been discussing is exactly the structure that the federal court has. The federal court has district courts, which are its trial courts, circuit courts of appeal, which incidentally can encompass many states. For instance, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, the largest circuit in the country, spans from California to Hawaii and even up to Alaska. And then finally, the United States Supreme Court. Looking at this map of the United States, we see the highlighted states. Most of the states, by far, follow the pattern that we've been discussing. The structure of the Texas state courts is a little bit different. Let's look at those. At the trial court level, we have 4 courts at 3 different levels. We have justice of the peace courts, municipal courts at the lowest level. At the intermediate or middle level, we have county courts. And then at the top level, we have district courts. Again, at the lowest level, the justice of the peace courts and the municipal courts, we see that their jurisdiction is substantially similar. The county courts, the intermediate level trial courts in the Texas system, are composed of constitutional courts, courts authorized by the Texas Constitution, statutory courts, courts authorized by the Texas legislature, and probate courts. And then finally, the district courts are the trial courts, the main trial courts in the Texas court system. Most civil cases are heard in the district courts, as are domestic relations cases, divorces and the like, serious criminal cases, felonies, and juvenile cases. The intermediate appeal court in Texas is the Texas Courts of Appeal. That court hears appeals from the district courts and appeals from the county courts. And in Texas, the court of last resort, unlike in every other state except Oklahoma, is bifurcated, that is, broken into 2. There's the Texas Supreme Court, which hears all non-criminal appeals, and then the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, which hears exclusively criminal matters. This bifurcation of the highest court in the state might help to explain why Texas is underrepresented on the U.S. Supreme Court, as nominations to the U.S. Supreme Court generally require experience of a broad judicial nature. So does Texas need some court reform? Perhaps it might, but it would have to come from the top down, because the state constitution of Texas provides for much of what we've been discussing. If there were to be court reform, we could streamline the court system, lower the cost to the taxpayers and litigants, and make litigation in Texas more uniform with litigation in most other places in the country.